In the dusty corners of the American frontier, some scars tell stories that powerful men would rather keep buried. Don't let her touch you. She's cursed. Look at that face. God's punishment for something wicked. No decent man would ever claim her. But what if those scars weren't marks of shame, but evidence of survival? What if the woman they mocked carried the one truth that could bring down the most powerful family in New Mexico territory? I've seen marks like these before, and I know exactly what they mean. In 1882, a woman with a scarred face walked into Silver Creek carrying secrets carved into her very skin. And when a black cowboy recognized what those scars really were, a town built on lies would face a reckoning it never saw coming. This is a story they tried to erase from history, a story about the scars we wear, the truths we carry, and the courage it takes to face both. Stay until the very end, because what happens when these two outcasts stand together will shake this frontier town to its foundation and reveal a conspiracy that reaches all the way to the territorial governor's office. Before we ride into Silver Creek, I need you to do something important right now. Hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell. Why? Because here at the Black Rancher, we're uncovering the forgotten stories of black heroes and unsung survivors who shaped the American frontier. Stories deliberately buried because they challenged the powerful and exposed the truth. These aren't just tales of the Old West. These are stories about dignity, courage, and the fight for justice that echoes into our own time. If you believe everyone deserves to see themselves in America's history, share this video right now. Help us preserve these legacies together. Now let's discover what really happened when a scarred woman and a black cowboy dared to challenge the lies that built Silver Creek. Welcome to the Black Rancher. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Silver Creek's main street as Nathaniel Cross guided his chestnut mare toward the general store. At 38 years old, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who'd earned every acre of land he owned through sweat, strategy, and refusing to accept the limitations others tried to impose. His Rolling Thunder Ranch sat 15 miles north of Silver Creek, 800 acres of prime grazing land he'd purchased piece by piece over 12 years. The townspeople tolerated his presence because his money spent as well as anyone's, but acceptance was another matter entirely. Nathaniel had learned to live with sideways glances and conversations that died when he entered a room. He was tying his horse to the hitching post when he heard the commotion inside Morton's general store. "I don't want your kind touching my merchandise." That was Harvey Morton's voice, sharp with disgust. "You'll drive away my decent customers." "I only need flour and coffee, Mr. Morton. I have money." The woman's voice was quiet but steady, carrying a dignity that didn't match the contempt being thrown at her. Nathaniel stepped through the door just as Morton pointed toward the exit. "Get out. I won't sell to you. This is a respectable establishment." The woman stood her ground near the counter, a small coin purse clutched in her gloved hands. She wore a simple gray dress and a wide-brimmed hat that cast shadows across her face. What Nathaniel could see of her features showed burn scars running down the left side, from temple to jaw. The skin pulled tight and discolored. But it wasn't the scars that caught Nathaniel's attention. It was the pattern, the specific shape and placement that made his blood run cold with recognition. "Mr. Morton," Nathaniel said evenly, stepping fully into the store, "I believe the lady is a paying customer." Morton's face flushed red. "This don't concern you, Cross." "I have a right to refuse service. You have flour and coffee on the shelf, the lady has money. Seems like a simple transaction to me." Nathaniel's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. The woman turned to look at him directly for the first time. Her right eye was gray-green, sharp with intelligence. The left eye was partially obscured by scarring, but he could see the wariness there, the exhaustion of someone who'd fought this battle too many times. "I don't need charity," she said softly, addressing Nathaniel, "and I don't want trouble." "Ain't charity, ma'am, just business." He turned to Morton. "Ring up the lady's items, and while you're at it, add 3 pounds of bacon, a tin of peaches, and 2 sacks of cornmeal to my order. I'll be paying for all of it." Morton sputtered. "Now see here." Unless you'd rather explain to the town council why you're turning away paying customers. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. I hear they're mighty concerned about the town's reputation. Might not look good if word spread that Morton's store discriminates based on appearance. The threat hung in the air. Morton knew as well as anyone that Nathaniel's money kept several local businesses afloat during hard months. The storekeeper's jaw worked silently before he finally grabbed the items with exaggerated roughness. That'll be $4.30, he muttered, slamming the goods onto the counter. The woman reached for her purse, but Nathaniel was quicker, placing coins on the counter. Like I said, my order. I can't accept, she began. Then consider it a loan. You can pay me back when you're settled. He gathered the supplies into a wooden crate. You have transportation? She shook her head. I'm staying at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house. It's only 3 blocks. These supplies are heavy. My wagon's outside. I'll give you a ride. For a moment, she looked like she might refuse, pride warring with practicality. Finally, she nodded. Thank you, Mr. Cross. Nathaniel Cross. I run the Rolling Thunder Ranch north of here. Rebecca Morrison. She didn't extend her hand, but her voice carried genuine gratitude. Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Cross. As they walked out of the store, Nathaniel heard Morton mutter, birds of a feather. Both marked by the devil, both think they belong where decent folk live. Nathaniel pretended not to hear, but he saw Rebecca's shoulders tense. She'd heard it too. Outside, he loaded the crate into his wagon and helped Rebecca onto the bench seat. As she settled beside him, adjusting her hat to keep the left side of her face shadowed, Nathaniel snapped the reins and guided the mare down the street. You're new to Silver Creek, he observed. Arrived 3 days ago. Rebecca kept her gaze forward. I'm a seamstress. Thought I might find work here. Thought you might, or hoping you will? A ghost of a smile touched her lips. The latter, I suppose. Though after today's reception, I'm reconsidering my prospects. They rode in silence for a moment before Nathaniel spoke again, his voice careful. Those scars on your face, may I ask how you got them? Rebecca's hand moved instinctively to her cheek, a protective gesture. A fire, 5 years ago. I was trapped in a burning building. Which building? The question was direct enough to surprise her. She turned to look at him, really look at him, studying his face with new wariness. Why do you want to know? Because I've seen marks like those before. Nathaniel kept his voice low. And if I'm right about what caused them, you didn't get them from any ordinary fire. Rebecca's entire body went rigid. Her hand dropped from her face to grip the edge of the wagon seat. I don't know what you're talking about. The Delgado Hacienda, outside Santa Fe, Christmas Eve, 1877. Nathaniel watched her from the corner of his eye. There was a fire that night. The main house burned to the ground. They said it was an accident, a candle knocked over during the festivities. But some of us who worked the neighboring ranches heard different stories. Stories about people locked in the servants' quarters. Stories about witnesses who disappeared. Rebecca's breathing had become shallow. Mr. Cross, I think you're mistaken. Am I? He pulled the wagon to a stop in front of Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, a modest 2-story structure with peeling paint and a crooked porch. But he didn't move to help her down. Instead, he rolled up his right sleeve, revealing his own scars, the unmistakable marks of shackles and chains. I was born into slavery in Mississippi, escaped when I was 16, made my way west after the war. So I've seen enough violence, enough cruelty to recognize its marks. He looked directly at her. Those burns on your face, they're not from any ordinary fire. They're from being held down, forced against something hot, something like the brand they used on the Delgado cattle. The blood drained from Rebecca's face. For a long moment she sat frozen, staring at him with eyes that had gone wide with shock and fear. How? She whispered. How did you know? The pattern. The placement. Burns from a general fire are random, chaotic, but yours are too precise, too deliberate. Nathaniel's voice softened. Someone marked you, didn't they? And they did it at the Delgado Hacienda. Tears welled in Rebecca's eyes. Her hands were shaking now. You can't know this. You can't tell anyone. They'll kill me. They'll... Easy. Nathaniel placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. I'm not here to hurt you, Miss Morrison, but I am here to tell you that you're not safe in Silver Creek. Do you know who owns most of this town? She shook her head mutely. Carlos Delgado Jr., the son of the man who owned that hacienda. Nathaniel let that information sink in. He moved his operations here 2 years ago, bought the saloon, the hotel, half the businesses on Main Street. Everyone knows the Delgado name carries power. What they don't know is what that power was built on. Rebecca's voice came out as barely a whisper. Then I need to leave, tonight. Before what? Before they recognize you too? Nathaniel shook his head. Running won't help. If I recognize those marks, someone else will. Someone who works for Delgado. Then what do I do? Desperation crept into her voice. I have nowhere else to go, no family, no friends. I've been running for 5 years trying to stay ahead of my past, and I thought maybe here, in a new territory, I could finally stop. Nathaniel studied her face, not the scars but the person beneath them. He saw courage there and stubbornness, and the kind of weary determination that came from surviving things that should have killed you. Come work for me, he said abruptly. Rebecca blinked. What? My ranch. I need help with the house. Cooking, mending, managing supplies. Room and board included, plus a fair wage. You'd be 15 miles from town, away from prying eyes. It's not much, but it's safer than staying here. Mr. Cross, you don't even know me. For all you know, I could be a survivor, he interrupted, just like me. And if those scars mean what I think they mean, you've got information that could bring down one of the most powerful families in the territory. That makes you either very dangerous or very valuable. Probably both. He offered his hand. What do you say? Rebecca looked at his outstretched hand, then at his face, searching for deception or ulterior motives. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because after a long moment she placed her gloved hand in his. I say yes, Mr. Cross, though I should warn you. If you're right about the Delgados recognizing me, you'll be painting a target on your own back. Nathaniel's smile was grim. Wouldn't be the first time, and between you and me, Miss Morrison, I'd rather stand and fight than spend my life running. As he helped her down from the wagon, Nathaniel caught sight of a figure watching them from across the street. A well-dressed Mexican man with cold eyes and a distinctive silver watch chain. The man's gaze lingered on Rebecca's scarred face for just a moment too long before he turned and disappeared into the Silver Creek saloon. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. They'd been seen, and if he was right about who that man worked for, their time had just gotten a lot shorter. Gather your things, he said quietly to Rebecca. We leave within the hour. She nodded, understanding the urgency in his voice. As she hurried up the boarding house steps, Nathaniel turned back to his wagon, his mind already planning the route back to the ranch and calculating how long they had before the Delgados made their move. He'd spent 12 years building a life here, carving out a place where a black man could own land and command respect. But some fights were bigger than property and status. Some truths demanded to be told no matter the cost, and looking at the scars on Rebecca Morrison's face, Nathaniel knew they were about to uncover one of those truths. The ride back to Rolling Thunder Ranch took nearly 3 hours, following the winding trail through canyon country as the sun dipped toward the western horizon. Rebecca sat beside Nathaniel in the wagon, her few belongings packed in a worn carpet bag at her feet. She'd spoken little since they left Silver Creek, her gaze fixed on the landscape but her mind clearly elsewhere. Nathaniel didn't push. He'd learned long ago that some stories needed time before they could be told. The Rolling Thunder Ranch came into view as they crested the final ridge. A sturdy adobe and timber house with a wide porch, surrounded by corrals and outbuildings. In the distance, Nathaniel's cattle grazed across rolling grassland, dark shapes against the golden evening light. A few horses stood in the near corral, including his prized breeding stallion, Thunder. It's beautiful, Rebecca said softly, the first words she'd spoken in an hour. Built it myself. Well, most of it. Nathaniel guided the wagon toward the house, had some help with the barn from neighboring ranchers. Even in a territory where folks don't much care for a black landowner, they'll come together when there's work to be done. As they approached, A tall, lean man emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. He was in his mid-20s, with sun-darkened skin and the easy stance of someone comfortable with hard labor. "Boss," the man called out, "wasn't expecting you back till sundown." "Change of plans, Marcus." Nathaniel hopped down from the wagon and reached up to help Rebecca. "We've got a new housekeeper. Miss Rebecca Morrison, this is Marcus Webb. He's my ranch hand and about the best horse wrangler this side of the Rio Grande." Marcus touched the brim of his hat politely, but his eyes registered surprise when he saw Rebecca's scars. To his credit, he quickly masked his reaction. "Ma'am, welcome to Rolling Thunder." "Thank you, Mr. Webb." Rebecca stepped down carefully, accepting Nathaniel's assistance. "Just Marcus, ma'am. We don't stand on formality much out here." He glanced at Nathaniel. "Should I take care of the wagon?" "I'll get it. Why don't you show Miss Morrison to the guest room, the one with the window facing east, and let her know where everything is. Kitchen, well, washroom." "Will do, boss." Marcus gestured toward the house. "This way, Miss Morrison, I'll get your bag." As Marcus led Rebecca into the house, Nathaniel unhitched the mare and led her to the stable. He took his time rubbing her down and filling her trough, using the familiar motions to settle his thoughts. He'd made a dangerous decision today. Bringing Rebecca here wasn't just about helping a woman in need. It was about confronting a truth that had haunted him since he'd first heard the whispered stories about the Delgado Hacienda fire. Back in 1877, Nathaniel had been working as a hand on the neighboring Rodriguez ranch. He'd seen the fire that Christmas Eve, the orange glow lighting up the night sky. The next day, he'd ridden over with others to help with the aftermath. What they'd found had turned his stomach. The main house had burned completely, along with the servants' quarters. The official story was that a candle had been knocked over during a celebration, but Nathaniel had seen the iron bars on the windows of the servants' quarters, bars that could only be locked from the outside. He'd heard the whispered accounts from surviving workers about screams that had been ignored, about doors that wouldn't open, about people trapped deliberately. Most damning of all, he'd seen the branding iron in the courtyard, a distinctive pattern in the shape of the Delgado cattle brand, still sitting in the fire pit, surrounded by blood. He'd tried to speak up, to demand an investigation, but the Delgados were powerful, connected to the territorial government. The local sheriff had warned Nathaniel to keep his mouth shut if he knew what was good for him. And when two workers who'd survived the fire mysteriously disappeared a week later, Nathaniel had taken the hint. He'd moved to New Mexico territory shortly after, determined to build something of his own, somewhere he could have a measure of control and safety. But he'd never forgotten what he'd seen, and he'd never stopped wondering what had really happened that night. Now, looking at Rebecca's scars, he suspected he was finally going to learn the truth. When Nathaniel entered the house, he found Rebecca in the kitchen with Marcus, who was explaining where supplies were kept. The kitchen was simple but well-equipped. A large wood-burning stove, a sturdy table, shelves lined with preserved goods, and a window that overlooked the eastern pasture. "Thank you, Marcus," Nathaniel said. "Why don't you head over to the south pasture and check on those yearlings? I'll join you at sunrise." Marcus nodded, tipped his hat to Rebecca again, and headed out. Once they were alone, Nathaniel pulled out a chair at the table. "Sit, please. We need to talk." Rebecca lowered herself into the chair opposite him, her hands folded in her lap. In the lamplight, the scars on her face stood out more starkly, but Nathaniel kept his eyes on hers. "I need you to tell me what happened at the Delgado Hacienda," he said. "All of it. If we're going to keep you safe, if we're going to do anything about what happened, I need to know the truth." Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, her fingers twisting together. Finally, she spoke. "My real name isn't Rebecca Morrison. It's Rosa Martinez. I was 22 when I went to work at the Delgado Hacienda as a seamstress for Senora Delgado. It was supposed to be a good position, steady pay, a room in the servants' quarters, respectable work." She paused, swallowing hard. "For the first few months, everything was fine. I did my work, kept to myself. But then I started noticing things, strangers arriving at night, conversations that stopped when I entered a room, locked doors in parts of the house where I was told never to go." "What kind of strangers?" Nathaniel asked. Men. Always men. Well-dressed, speaking quietly with Senor Delgado in his study, and sometimes I'd hear crying, coming from the locked rooms. Rosa's voice dropped to almost a whisper. One night, I heard a girl screaming. I tried to find help, but the other servants, they told me to mind my own business. They said asking questions was dangerous. Nathaniel felt his jaw tighten. He'd suspected, but hearing it confirmed made his blood run cold. I should have listened to them, Rosa continued. But I couldn't stop thinking about that girl. So one night when everyone was asleep, I snuck into the forbidden wing of the house. I found a hallway with 5 doors, all locked, and through one of them, I could hear sobbing. What did you do? I picked the lock. It wasn't hard. My father had been a locksmith before he died. Inside, I found a girl, maybe 15 years old. She was chained to a bed, bruised, terrified. Rosa's voice cracked. She told me her name was Maria. She said she'd been taken from her village 3 months earlier, that she was one of many, that the Delgados were trafficking women. The word hung in the air like poison. I wanted to free her right then, Rosa said, but she begged me not to. She said if I did, they'd kill us both. She told me to wait, to find proof, to get word to the authorities. So I did the only thing I could think of. I documented everything, every name I heard, every stranger who visited, every detail I could gather. I wrote it all down in a journal that I hid beneath a loose floorboard in my room. And they found out, Nathaniel said. Rosa nodded. 3 weeks later, I don't know how, maybe someone saw me writing, or maybe Maria told them under pressure. But one night, 3 of Delgado's men came to my room. They dragged me to the study where Senor Delgado was waiting. He asked me about the journal. I denied everything, but he already knew where I'd hidden it. He had one of his men bring it to him and burned it in the fireplace while I watched. Tears were streaming down her face now, but she kept talking. He said I'd seen too much, that I'd betrayed his hospitality. He ordered his men to hold me down and he... Her hand moved to her scarred cheek. He used the branding iron, the same one they used on the cattle. He said he was marking me as a thief and a liar, so everyone would know what I was. So no one would ever believe my word again. Nathaniel felt rage building in his chest, hot and dangerous, but he kept his voice calm. How did you escape? The fire, Rosa said. While they were branding me, I was screaming. I guess I knocked over a lamp. The study caught fire and it spread fast. In the chaos, the men let go of me. I ran. I should have tried to free the others. God knows I should have. But I was in so much pain, and the smoke was everywhere, and I ran. Rosa. Nathaniel reached across the table and gently took her hand. You were a victim too. You can't blame yourself for surviving. Can't I? She met his eyes, anguish clear in her expression. Those girls, Maria and the others, they're probably dead. And I have no proof of what happened, no journal, no evidence, just these scars, which everyone assumes are from an accident. I've been running ever since, changing my name, moving from town to town. Because I know if the Delgados find me, they'll finish what they started. Nathaniel was quiet for a moment, thinking. You said the Delgados burned your journal, but you remember what was in it. Every word, every name, every detail. Rosa tapped her temple. It's all still here, but without proof, it's just the word of a scarred woman against one of the most powerful families in the territory. Maybe not. Nathaniel stood and walked to a cabinet, pulling out a map of New Mexico and the surrounding territories. He spread it on the table. You said there were girls being trafficked. That means there had to be a network, people moving them, places they were taken, buyers who paid for them. That kind of operation leaves traces. Rosa leaned forward, studying the map. You think we can find evidence? I think if we're smart about it, we might. And I think I know someone who can help us, someone with connections to the federal marshals. He looked at her seriously. But Rosa, if we do this, there's no going back. The Delgados will come after us with everything they have. You'll be putting yourself in direct danger. I've been in danger since the moment I saw what they were doing, Rosa said, her voice steadying with new resolve. The difference is, Now I might actually have a chance to stop them. To get justice for Maria and all the others. She met his gaze. I'm tired of running, Mr. Cross. If you're willing to help me fight, then I'm ready to stop hiding. Nathaniel nodded slowly. Then we fight. But we do it smart. We gather evidence, we build an airtight case, and we make sure the truth can't be buried again. He extended his hand. Partners. Rosa shook it firmly. Partners. As they sat there in the lamplight, mapping out their next moves, neither of them noticed the figure watching from the shadows outside the window. A rider on a dark horse, close enough to see but too far to hear. The figure watched for another minute, then turned and rode silently back toward Silver Creek. In the Silver Creek saloon, Carlos Delgado Jr. sat at his private table on the second floor, overlooking the main room below. A man approached, the same well-dressed Mexican who'd watched Nathaniel and Rosa earlier that day. Well? Delgado asked, not looking up from his whiskey. It's her, Patron. I'm certain of it. The burn pattern matches the description your father gave. Delgado's fingers tightened around his glass. And she's staying at the Cross Ranch? Si. Rode out with him this afternoon. Delgado was quiet for a moment, his mind working. The Cross Ranch was on public land. No easy way to make the man disappear without drawing attention. And Nathaniel Cross, despite being black, had earned a grudging respect in the territory for his fair dealings and hard work. Moving against him openly would require justification. Keep watching them, Delgado finally said. I want to know everyone they talk to, everywhere they go, and find out if Cross has any connections to law enforcement or federal authorities. And the woman? She's a loose end that should have been tied off 5 years ago. Delgado drained his whiskey and set the glass down with a deliberate clink. My father was too sentimental, thinking the scars would be enough to discredit her. But we're more practical now. She disappears permanently. Just make it look like an accident. The man nodded and left. Delgado stared out the window at the darkening street, his reflection ghostly in the glass. The organization his father had built, the trafficking network that had made the Delgado family wealthy beyond measure, operated in the shadows, protected by bribes and fear. One scarred woman and a black rancher weren't going to change that. He'd make sure of it. We're halfway through this powerful journey and the stakes are about to get even higher. But before we continue, I want to ask you something important. Are you someone who believes truth matters? That justice is worth fighting for even when it's dangerous? Then I need you to do more than just watch this video. Subscribe to The Black Rancher right now and turn on those notifications. Every subscriber helps us reach more people with these forgotten stories. Stories of courage and resilience that deserve to be remembered. And here's the thing. Rosa and Nathaniel are about to face their most dangerous challenge yet. If you want to see how they expose the Delgado trafficking network and what price they'll pay for seeking justice, you need to stay until the very end. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this story, someone who understands that real heroism isn't about being fearless, it's about being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. Now let's see what happens when the Delgados make their move. Dawn broke over Rolling Thunder Ranch with the promise of rain. Nathaniel stood on the porch, coffee in hand, watching dark clouds gather on the western horizon. Marcus was already at work in the corral, training a young mare. The ranch was peaceful, orderly, everything Nathaniel had worked for, but peace, he'd learned, was a fragile thing. Rosa emerged from the house carrying her own cup of coffee. She'd slept little, Nathaniel could tell from the shadows under her eyes. But there was a new energy about her, the kind that came from finally deciding to stop running. I've been thinking about what you said last night, she began, about finding evidence. There's something I didn't mention before. Nathaniel turned to face her. What's that? Before they caught me, I managed to send a letter to the Territorial Marshal's office in Santa Fe. I didn't give my name, but I included enough details about the trafficking operation, dates, descriptions, even the name of one of the buyers I'd overheard. She paused. I never heard back, so I assumed either the letter never arrived or was ignored. But if it did reach the Marshal's office, then there might be a record of it, Nathaniel finished. An official complaint that could corroborate your testimony. He felt a spark of hope. Who's your contact? The one with connections to the federal marshals. James Riley. He's a circuit judge who rides through this territory twice a year. We served in the same cavalry unit during the war. He was an officer. I was a scout. He's one of the few men I'd trust with something this dangerous. When does he next come through? Should be in about 3 weeks. Usually stops in Roswell, about 2 days' ride from here. Nathaniel glanced at Rosa. If we can get copies of any complaints filed with the marshal's office, and if we can corroborate them with your testimony, we might have enough to launch a formal investigation. That's a lot of ifs. It is, but it's more than we had yesterday. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of hoofbeats. A rider was approaching fast from the direction of Silver Creek, too fast for a casual visit. Marcus looked up from the corral, his hand moving instinctively toward the rifle he kept nearby. The rider pulled up in a cloud of dust. It was Sarah Chen, who ran the boarding house where Rosa had briefly stayed. She was breathing hard, her face flushed with exertion and fear. "Mr. Cross," she called out. "Thank God you're here. I had to warn you." Nathaniel hurried down the porch steps. "Mrs. Chen, what's wrong?" "Men came to my boarding house last night. 4 of them asking about Miss Morrison." She glanced at Rosa, recognition and concern flashing across her face. "I told them she'd left town with you, but they already knew that. They wanted to know everything I knew about her, where she came from, what she said, who she talked to." "Did they hurt you?" Rosa asked, stepping forward. "No, but they made it clear what would happen if I didn't cooperate. They're Delgado's men, Mr. Cross. Everyone knows what that means." Sarah twisted her hands together. "After they left, I waited until dark and rode straight here. You both need to be careful. Whatever reason they have for looking for Miss Morrison, it's serious." "Thank you for warning us," Nathaniel said. "Did they say anything else?" Sarah hesitated. "One of them, the one who seemed to be in charge, he said something strange. He said, 'The patron wants to handle this personally. He's coming to finish what his father started.'" Rosa went pale. "Carlos Delgado Jr. is coming here." That's what it sounded like. Sarah looked between them. "What's this about, Mr. Cross? What did Miss Morrison do?" "Nothing," Nathaniel said firmly. "She witnessed a crime, and powerful people want to make sure she never talks about it. That's all you need to know, Mrs. Chen. And the less you know beyond that, the safer you'll be." Sarah nodded, understanding. "I should get back before I'm missed. But please, both of you, be careful." The Delgados don't make idle threats. After she'd ridden off, Marcus joined Nathaniel and Rosa on the porch. "Bossa, if the Delgados are making a move, we need to prepare." "Agreed." Nathaniel's mind was already working through possibilities. "Marcus, take inventory of our ammunition and weapons. Make sure the house is secure, shutters on all windows, extra bars on the doors. If they come, I want us to be ready." "You think they'll attack the ranch?" Rosa asked, disbelief in her voice. "I think Carlos Delgado Jr. is desperate enough to try anything. You're the only living witness to his family's trafficking operation. He can't risk you talking to the authorities." "Then maybe I should leave. Go somewhere else, where I won't put you and Marcus in danger." "And go where?" Nathaniel challenged. "The Delgados have money and connections across 3 territories. If they want you found, they'll find you. At least here, we can defend ourselves." Marcus cleared his throat. "Boss, there might be another option. We could get her to the U.S. Marshal's office in Albuquerque. It's a hard 3-day ride, but if she's under federal protection, she'd still have to testify, and without evidence to back up her story, it's her word against the Delgados," Nathaniel interrupted. "They'd discredit her, probably have her arrested on fabricated charges. We need proof before we involve the Marshals." "Then we're stuck here waiting for them to come to us." Rosa's frustration was evident. "Not waiting, preparing." Nathaniel looked at both of them. "The Delgados want this handled quietly. If they attack us directly, it draws attention, the kind of attention they can't afford. So they'll try to make it look like an accident, or they'll try to isolate Rosa and make her disappear. Either way, we stay together, we stay alert, and we don't give them any opportunities." Over the next 2 days, they turned Rolling Thunder Ranch into a fortress. Windows were reinforced, extra supplies were brought in, and Marcus drilled them on defensive positions. Nathaniel sent word to his few trusted neighbors, warning them that trouble might be coming and asking them to keep watch. On the third night, trouble arrived. It was just past midnight when the first shot rang out, shattering the kitchen window. Nathaniel rolled out of bed, already reaching for his rifle. He heard Marcus returning fire from his position in the barn, and Rosa, God bless her courage, was at the eastern window with the shotgun he'd given her, watching for movement. "How many?" Nathaniel called out. "At least 6, Marcus shouted back. "They're surrounding the house." Another volley of shots peppered the adobe walls. Nathaniel took position at the front window, peering through the shutters. In the moonlight, he could see figures moving between the outbuildings, professional shooters spreading out to cover all angles. This wasn't a random attack. This was an execution. "Rosa, stay low." Nathaniel fired twice at a shadow near the well, rewarded by a cry of pain. "Marcus, can you get to the house?" "I'll try." Nathaniel laid down covering fire, while Marcus sprinted from the barn to the house, diving through the door just as bullets chewed up the porch behind him. "We can't hold them off forever," Marcus panted, checking his ammunition. "They've got us pinned down." "We don't need forever." Nathaniel reloaded quickly. "We just need to last until dawn. Attackers like this don't want witnesses, and once the sun comes up, any neighboring ranchers will see the smoke from our chimney and come to investigate." "That's 4 hours away," Rosa said, her voice steady, despite the fear Nathaniel could see in her eyes. "Can we last that long?" "We're about to find out." The next 3 hours were a nightmare of gunfire, near misses, and desperate repositioning. The attackers tried twice to set fire to the barn, but Marcus's accuracy with a rifle kept them at bay. They attempted to rush the front door once, but Nathaniel's shotgun blast sent them retreating. But ammunition was running low, and exhaustion was setting in. It was during a brief lull in the shooting that Nathaniel heard it, a voice calling from outside. "Cross, can you hear me?" Nathaniel recognized the accent, Carlos Delgado Jr. "I can hear you," he shouted back. "You're a reasonable man, Cross. We don't need to keep shooting at each other. Just send out the woman and my men will ride away. You have my word." "Your word?" Nathaniel couldn't help the bitter laugh. "The word of a man who traffics women and murders witnesses? I'll pass." "You're making a mistake." Delgado's voice hardened. "You can't protect her forever. Sooner or later she'll pay for what she stole from my family, and you'll pay for harboring her." "What she stole?" Rosa called out before Nathaniel could stop her. "Is that what you tell yourself? That I'm the criminal? I saw what your family did. I saw the girls you kept locked up. I heard their screams." A long silence followed her words. When Delgado spoke again, his voice was ice. "You should have died in that fire, Puta. But don't worry, I'll correct my father's mistake. Before the sun rises, you'll wish you had." The renewed assault was savage. The attackers didn't care about subtlety anymore. They unleashed everything they had, turning the ranch into a war zone. A bullet caught Marcus in the shoulder, spinning him around. Rosa rushed to his side while Nathaniel tried to cover both windows. "I'm okay," Marcus gasped, pressing his hand to the wound. "Keep shooting." But Nathaniel knew they were in trouble. They had maybe a dozen rounds left between them, and the eastern sky was still dark. They weren't going to make it to dawn. That's when he heard it. Distant thunder. No, not thunder. Hoofbeats. A lot of them. The attackers heard it too. Their gunfire faltered, then stopped altogether. Nathaniel risked a look through the shutter and saw the Delgado men retreating toward their horses, glancing nervously at the trail leading to the ranch. A moment later, 6 riders crested the ridge, their horses at full gallop. They weren't the neighboring ranchers Nathaniel had hoped for. They were U.S. Marshals, their badges glinting in the moonlight. Leading them was a gray-haired man with stern features and a marshal's star on his chest. "Federal Marshals," the man shouted. "Drop your weapons and put your hands up." The Delgado men hesitated only a second before spurring their horses and fleeing into the darkness. 2 marshals gave chase while the others surrounded the ranch house. The gray-haired marshal dismounted and approached the porch. "Nathaniel Cross?" "That's me." Nathaniel lowered his rifle, stunned. "How did you know to come here?" "We didn't. We were headed to Silver Creek to investigate reports of a trafficking operation connected to the Delgado family." When we saw the gun battle from a distance, we rode to investigate. His eyes found Rosa, still kneeling beside Marcus. "Are you Rosa Martinez?" She stood slowly, surprise and hope warring on her face. "Yes, how do you know my name?" "You sent a letter to the Territorial Marshal's office 5 years ago, detailed allegations about the Delgado Hacienda and human trafficking. We've been building a case ever since, but we needed a witness, someone who could testify to what happened." He stepped closer. "Miss Martinez, we need you to come with us to Santa Fe. We have evidence, financial records, witness statements from other survivors we've located, documents showing the Delgado's connections to trafficking networks across the Southwest. But we need your testimony to tie it all together." Rosa looked at Nathaniel, tears streaming down her scarred face. "They believed me. All this time they were investigating." "They believed you," Nathaniel confirmed, feeling his own emotions rise. "Your letter made a difference." The marshal looked between them. "Mr. Cross, I'll need a statement from you as well about tonight's attack, and we'll need medical attention for your ranch hand. But first," he gestured to his deputies, "secure the area and make sure all the attackers are apprehended." As the marshals went to work, Nathaniel sat beside Rosa on the porch steps. Dawn was breaking now, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. "You did it," he said quietly. "You survived, and now you're going to bring them down." Rosa shook her head. "We did it. If you hadn't recognized my scars, if you hadn't given me shelter and believed my story..." She trailed off, overcome. "The scars they meant to shame you with. They became the evidence that convicted them," Nathaniel said. "That's justice, Rosa. Real justice." As the sun rose over Rolling Thunder Ranch, casting light on a new day, Nathaniel allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, the truth really could triumph over power and corruption. But he also knew that the fight wasn't over yet. The federal courthouse in Santa Fe was an imposing structure of adobe and timber, designed to project authority and permanence. Rosa stood on the steps, her hand resting on the iron railing, looking up at the building where she would finally confront the Delgado family. It had been 6 weeks since the attack on Rolling Thunder Ranch. 6 weeks of depositions, interviews, and preparation for the trial that would determine whether the Delgados faced justice or walked free. Nathaniel stood beside her, dressed in his best suit, a concession to the formality of the proceedings, though he'd drawn the line at a tie. Marcus, his shoulders still healing, had stayed back at the ranch to keep things running, but he'd sent his support in a letter Rosa kept folded in her pocket. "You ready?" Nathaniel asked. Rosa touched her scarred cheek, feeling the familiar texture of damaged skin. "I've been ready for 5 years, let's end this." Inside the courthouse, the gallery was packed. Word of the trial had spread throughout the territory, not just because of the sensational nature of the charges, but because the Delgado family was fighting back with every resource they had. They'd hired the most expensive lawyers from San Francisco, launched a publicity campaign painting Rosa as a disturbed liar, and called in favors from every politician they'd ever bribed. But the federal prosecutors had evidence now. Real evidence. As Rosa took her seat at the witness table, she scanned the room. Carlos Delgado Jr. sat at the defense table, his face a mask of arrogant confidence. Beside him were 3 other members of the Delgado family, all facing charges of conspiracy, human trafficking, and attempted murder. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Margaret Hayes, approached Rosa with a kind smile. "Miss Martinez, I know this won't be easy, but remember, you're not on trial here. They are. You're simply telling the truth." Rosa nodded, drawing strength from Nathaniel's steady presence in the gallery behind her. The judge, a silver-haired man with a reputation for being fair but stern, called the court to order. "This is the case of the United States versus Delgado et al. Counsel. Are you ready to proceed?" "Yes, Your Honor," both sides replied. Margaret Hayes stood. "The prosecution calls Rosa Martinez to the stand." Rosa walked to the witness box, was sworn in, and took her seat. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath as Margaret began her questions. "Miss Martinez, please tell the court about your employment with the Delgado family." Rosa's voice was steady as she recounted arriving at the hacienda, her work as a seamstress, the locked rooms, the crying she'd heard. She described finding Maria chained in the forbidden wing, documenting what she discovered, and the night when her secrets were uncovered. "And what happened when Senor Delgado found your journal?" Margaret asked. "He burned it in the fireplace. Then he ordered his men to hold me down while he—" Rosa's voice wavered slightly. "While he branded me with the cattle iron. He said he was marking me so no one would ever believe my word, so everyone would know I was a thief and a liar." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Even the judge looked grim. "Can you show the court these marks?" Margaret asked gently. Rosa hesitated, then slowly removed the scarf she'd worn to partially conceal her scars. She turned her face to show the full extent of the branding, the distinctive pattern of the Delgado cattle brand burned into her skin. The courtroom erupted in shocked whispers. The judge had to bang his gavel for order. "Let the record show," Margaret said, "that the witness bears scars consistent with branding by a heated iron in the exact pattern of the Delgado family cattle brand." The defense attorney, a slick man named Harrison, objected. "Your Honor, these scars could have come from any number of sources. There's no proof they were inflicted by my client's family." "We'll address that shortly," Margaret said. "Miss Martinez, after you were branded, what happened?" "The fire started. I escaped. I've been running ever since." Margaret returned to her table and picked up a document. "Miss Martinez, do you recognize this?" Rosa studied it. "It's a copy of the letter I sent to the Territorial Marshal's office in 1878, detailing what I'd witnessed at the Delgado Hacienda. And this letter prompted an investigation, did it not?" "Objection," Harrison stood. "What the letter prompted is speculation." "Sustained," the judge said. "Rephrase, counsel." Margaret smiled slightly. "I'll approach this differently, Your Honor. I'd like to call Marshal Thomas Garrett to the stand." The gray-haired marshal who'd rescued them at Rolling Thunder Ranch took the witness box. He testified about receiving Rosa's letter, launching a covert investigation, finding financial records that showed payments to known human traffickers, and locating other survivors willing to testify. "And what did these survivors tell you?" Margaret asked. "They described an organized trafficking operation spanning multiple territories. Girls and young women would be taken, sometimes kidnapped, sometimes purchased from desperate families, and sold to buyers across the Southwest. The Delgado Hacienda served as a processing center where the victims were held until they could be moved to their final destinations." "How many victims did you identify?" 47, over a period of 6 years. That we know of." Another shocked murmur from the gallery. Harrison cross-examined aggressively, trying to poke holes in the investigation, questioning the credibility of the other witnesses, suggesting the financial records could be explained as legitimate business transactions. But Marshal Garrett's testimony held firm. The trial continued for 3 days. Other survivors took the stand, their testimonies corroborating Rosa's account. Financial experts presented evidence of money laundering and suspicious payments. A metallurgist testified that the pattern of Rosa's scars matched perfectly with an iron brand recovered from the burned hacienda. But the defense had witnesses too, character witnesses who testified to the Delgado's generosity and standing in the community, workers from the hacienda who claimed they'd never seen anything suspicious, a doctor who suggested Rosa's scars could have come from an accidental fire. On the final day of testimony, Harrison called Carlos Delgado Jr. to the stand. "Mr. Delgado," Harrison began, "did you or your family ever engage in human trafficking?" "Absolutely not." Delgado's voice was smooth, confident. "These accusations are the fantasies of a disturbed woman who resented her termination from employment. Miss Martinez, or should I say, Miss Martinez, since that's apparently not her real name, was caught stealing from the hacienda and fired. Everything that's happened since is her attempt at revenge. And the attack on the Cross Ranch? I had nothing to do with that. If someone attacked Mr. Cross's property, they were acting without my knowledge or consent. It was a smooth performance, and Rosa could see it swaying some members of the jury. That's when Margaret Hayes stood for her cross-examination. Mr. Delgado, you testified that Miss Martinez was fired for theft. Do you have any documentation of this?" The Hacienda records were destroyed in the fire. How convenient. So we only have your word that she was fired for theft, and we only have her word that she witnessed trafficking. Seems like it comes down to credibility, doesn't it? I suppose it does. Then let's talk about credibility. Margaret walked to her table and picked up another document. Mr. Delgado, were you aware that 3 of your ranch hands have come forward in the past week, offering testimony in exchange for immunity? Delgado's confident expression flickered. I don't know what you're talking about. These men, Paulo Reyes, Thomas Sandoval, and James Cortez, all state that they participated in the trafficking operation under your direct orders. They've provided detailed accounts of how the operation worked, including the names of buyers, the routes used to transport victims, and the methods used to silence anyone who asked too many questions. She paused. Including the branding of Rosa Martinez. The courtroom exploded. The judge banged his gavel repeatedly, calling for order. Harrison was on his feet. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. We were not informed of these new witnesses. Because they only came forward after your client foolishly ordered an attack on a federal witness, Margaret shot back. An attack that was witnessed by U.S. Marshals and documented in official reports. That attack made it clear to these men that the Delgado organization was collapsing, and they decided to save themselves. The judge considered. I'll allow the testimony, but counsel, make sure these witnesses are available for cross-examination. Over the next day, the 3 ranch hands took the stand. Their testimonies were damning. Detailed accounts of the trafficking operation, the systematic abuse of victims, and the lengths the Delgados would go to protect their enterprise. When the final witness finished, the judge called for closing arguments. Margaret Hayes stood before the jury, her voice firm and clear. Members of the jury, you've heard overwhelming evidence of a trafficking operation that destroyed lives, tore apart families, and treated human beings as merchandise. The defense wants you to believe this is all a fabrication by a vengeful ex-employee. But look at the evidence. Look at Rosa Martinez's scars, physical proof of the Delgados' brutality. Look at the financial records, the testimony of multiple witnesses, the attempted cover-up through violence. She pointed at the defense table. These people thought they were untouchable. They thought their wealth and connections would protect them. They thought they could literally brand a witness, and no one would believe her. But they were wrong. Margaret's voice softened as she looked at Rosa. Miss Martinez survived unspeakable horror. She carried the evidence of her trauma on her face for 5 years, enduring mockery and rejection, all while knowing the truth. And she never stopped trying to get justice for Maria and all the others. Don't let her courage be in vain. Find the defendants guilty and send a message that no one, no matter how powerful, is above the law. Harrison's closing argument was desperate, trying to create reasonable doubt, painting the prosecution's witnesses as criminals trying to avoid punishment themselves. But Rosa could see it wasn't working. The jury's faces were set with determination. After 2 hours of deliberation, they returned. Has the jury reached a verdict? The judge asked. We have, Your Honor. How do you find the defendants on the charge of conspiracy to commit human trafficking? Guilty on all counts. Rosa felt tears streaming down her face as the verdict was read for each charge. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Nathaniel reached forward from his seat behind her, squeezing her shoulder. The Delgados showed no emotion as they were led away in chains, but Rosa saw the moment Carlos Delgado Jr.'s mask cracked, a flash of rage and disbelief that justice had actually been served. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, but Marshal Garrett and his deputies created a path for Rosa and Nathaniel to leave. How do you feel? A reporter shouted. Rosa paused, looking back at the courthouse. I feel like Maria's screams were finally heard. I feel like the 47 women who suffered weren't forgotten. I feel like these scars, she touched her face. These scars finally mean something. As they walked away from the courthouse, Nathaniel spoke quietly. What will you do now? Rosa smiled, a real smile, the first he'd seen. I think I'd like to go back to Rolling Thunder Ranch, if the offer still stands. I've spent 5 years running. It's time to build a home. The offer stands, Nathaniel said. Always. They rode back to New Mexico territory as the sun set behind them. Two survivors who'd refused to let the world's cruelty define them. Behind them, the Delgados began their sentences. But more importantly, 47 victims finally had their justice. And Rosa Martinez, once marked as worthless, had proven that courage and truth could triumph over power and corruption. 6 months after the trial, Rolling Thunder Ranch had transformed into something more than just Nathaniel's property. It had become a sanctuary. Rosa stood on the porch, watching the sun rise over the eastern pasture. The ranch had grown in the past months. They'd added a second building, a bunkhouse that could accommodate up to 8 people, because word had spread about what happened at the trial, and survivors had started reaching out. Some were women who'd escaped the Delgado trafficking operation. Others were people who'd suffered different kinds of trauma, but recognized in Rosa's story a kindred spirit, someone who'd turned their scars into strength. "Coffee's ready," Marcus called from inside, his shoulder fully healed now. Rosa turned to see not just Marcus, but 3 of their current residents helping prepare breakfast. There was Elena, 19, who'd been rescued from a trafficking ring in Colorado. Thomas, a former slave who still bore whip scars and had nowhere to go after freedom. And Sarah, a Navajo woman who'd survived a violent attack and found refuge at the ranch when her own community couldn't protect her. The ranch operated on a simple principle: work, heal, build something better. Everyone contributed according to their abilities. They raised cattle, trained horses, and grew enough food to sustain themselves. But more than that, they created a community where scars, physical and emotional, weren't sources of shame, but testaments to survival. Nathaniel emerged from the barn, leading Thunder. He'd been up since before dawn, as usual, checking on the stock. When he saw Rosa, he smiled, that quiet, genuine smile that had become familiar over the months. "Morning," he said, climbing the porch steps. "We've got buyers coming from Roswell this afternoon to look at those yearlings. Should be a good price." Marcus already mentioned it. Eleanor's nervous. It's her first time dealing with buyers. "She'll do fine. She's got a good eye for horses." Nathaniel settled into the chair beside Rosa, accepting the coffee cup she handed him. "Had a letter from Margaret Hayes yesterday. She's working on legislation to strengthen protections for trafficking victims. Wants to know if you'd be willing to testify before the territorial legislature." Rosa considered. "Will it help?" "She thinks so." "Your testimony at the trial changed a lot of minds, if you're comfortable with it." "I'll do it." Rosa touched her scarred cheek, a gesture that had become less self-conscious over time. "These scars tell a story. If that story can help change laws and protect others, then they're worth bearing." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the ranch come to life. It was Marcus who'd first called them a family, this unlikely collection of survivors and outcasts, and somehow it fit. "I've been thinking," Nathaniel said carefully. "The ranch is doing well, better than I'd hoped. We could expand further, maybe purchase the adjacent section, create more space, help more people." "That sounds like a good plan." "It would be easier with a partner, someone with equal say in decisions, someone invested in the mission." He turned to look at her. "I'm talking about a real partnership, Rosa, not just employer and employee." Rosa met his eyes, understanding the weight of what he was offering. Not marriage. Neither of them was ready for that, and maybe never would be, but something equally valuable. True partnership, built on respect and shared purpose. "Equal partners," she said, "in all things." "In all things," he confirmed. They shook hands, sealing the agreement, but the gesture turned into something more. Nathaniel covering her scarred hand with both of his, Rosa squeezing back with gratitude and trust. Their moment was interrupted by the sound of a wagon approaching, a familiar wagon. "That's Judge Riley," Nathaniel said, standing. "Wonder what brings him out here." James Riley climbed down from the wagon, his weathered face breaking into a smile. "Nathaniel, Rosa, hope I'm not intruding." "Never," Nathaniel said, shaking his hand. "What brings you to Rolling Thunder?" "Official business and personal news." Riley pulled an envelope from his coat. "The territorial governor has signed the legislation Margaret Hayes drafted. New protections for trafficking victims. stricter penalties for traffickers, and funding for survivor support programs. He wanted me to personally thank you both for making this possible. Rosa felt tears prick her eyes. Legislation because of the trial? Because of your courage, Riley corrected. Your testimony didn't just convict the Delgados, it sparked a movement. People across the territory are demanding better protections, more investigations. You changed things, Rosa. We changed things, Rosa said, glancing at Nathaniel. None of this would have happened if Nathaniel hadn't recognized my scars for what they were. Speaking of which, Riley said, there's something else. The governor is establishing a commission to investigate other potential trafficking operations in the Southwest. He's asked if you'd be willing to serve as an advisor. Not full-time, you could work from here, review cases, provide testimony when needed. There would be compensation, of course. Nathaniel and Rosa exchanged glances. I'll do it, Rosa said. If these scars can help identify other victims, other survivors, then I'll use them. Riley nodded approvingly. I thought you'd say that. There's one more thing. He pulled out another document. This is a commendation from the U.S. Marshal Service, for both of you. For bravery, for assisting in a federal investigation, and for, and I quote, demonstrating the highest principles of justice and human dignity. Marcus, Elena, Thomas, and Sarah had gathered on the porch now, listening. When Riley finished, they erupted in cheers and applause. We're proud of you, Elena said shyly. Both of you. After Riley left, promising to return for the legislation signing ceremony, the ranch settled back into its rhythm. But something had shifted, a sense of purpose that went beyond simple survival. That evening, as the sun set, Nathaniel and Rosa stood together looking out over their land now officially partnered as of that afternoon's handshake. 5 years ago, Rosa said quietly, I was running through the night, my face burning, convinced my life was over, that no one would ever see me as anything but a scarred, damaged thing. And now I know that scars aren't endings. They're beginnings, evidence that we survived, proof that we're strong enough to carry the truth even when it hurts. Nathaniel nodded. My grandfather was a slave in Mississippi. He told me once that freedom isn't just about breaking chains, it's about deciding who you want to be once they're broken. You did that, Rosa. You didn't just survive. You chose to fight, to build, to help others. That's true freedom. Rosa looked at the people on the porch, her family now in all the ways that mattered. I couldn't have done it alone. No one can. That's what they don't understand. The powerful, the cruel. They think strength is about domination, about making others fear you. But real strength, it's this. He gestured at the ranch. Building something together. Standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves. Making sure your scars mean something. As night fell over Rolling Thunder Ranch, lights flickered on in the windows. Inside, Elena was teaching Thomas to read. Sarah was mending saddles while Marcus told stories about his cavalry days. And in the center of it all, a scarred woman and a black cowboy who'd both refused to let the world define them. They'd mocked her scars, tried to use them to silence her, to make her invisible. But those scars had become her testimony, her evidence, her strength. And in the end, the mark they'd meant to destroy her with became the mark that set her free. You've just witnessed the story of Rosa Martinez and Nathaniel Cross, a story of courage, justice, and the transformative power of standing up for what's right, no matter the cost. This isn't just history. This is a reminder that trafficking, exploitation, and the silencing of survivors still happen today. And it's a reminder that ordinary people like Rosa and Nathaniel, can make extraordinary differences when they refuse to stay silent. If this story moved you, I need you to do 3 things right now. First, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for The Black Rancher. We're committed to uncovering the forgotten stories of black heroes and unsung survivors who shaped the American frontier. Stories that challenge power, demand justice, and remind us of our shared humanity. Second, share this video. Send it to someone who needs to hear Rosa's story, someone who's carrying their own scars and needs to know that survival can become strength, someone who believes truth still matters. Third, if you or someone you know is a victim of human trafficking, please reach out for help. The National Human Trafficking Hotline is 1-888-373-7888. You are not alone, and your story matters. Every view, every share, every comment helps us reach more people with these essential stories. Thank you for spending the last hour with us, exploring a chapter of American history that deserves to be remembered. Rosa's scars were meant to silence her. Instead, they became her testimony. What will yours become? Drop a comment below and let me know. What moment in this story impacted you most? What other forgotten stories from the frontier would you like to hear? Until our trails cross again, remember, the most dangerous thing you can do to truth is try to bury it, because somewhere, someone will always be brave enough to dig it up. This is the Black Rancher, reminding you that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's standing up anyway, scars and all. Thank you for watching. And thank you for believing that justice, even delayed, is always worth fighting for.